I'm gonna let everyone get in quick, but I have a bunch of questions from last time when I made this video. Last time I got cut off, so we're gonna go ahead and answer those questions. So, all right. Question number one is what makes a great offer versus a weak offer. So, a great offer has to make sense and it has to be something that is so obvious for a buyer that a sales call is extremely easy and marketing is extremely easy. If you have a weak offer, marketing and sales becomes a lot tougher. So, what are the components of a great offer? The biggest thing is it has to serve one person very, very specifically to one problem. So you have to solve one problem and you have to do that to one person. So, for example, there's a lot of marketing agencies that they have like 10 different services that they want to sell. They want to sell websites, they want to sell paid ads, they want to sell blogs, and then they want to sell to everyone. That's a terrible offer. The reason why it's a terrible offer is because you're not excluding anyone. When you create an offer, it needs to be extremely exclusive and you need to solve one pain point because when you do that, marketing and sales becomes a lot easier. But like I said, a great offer is something where typically the perceived value is 10x of the price. So if you're selling software and it's 5K a month, it should be able to save them or make them another 50K per month. So that's typically what a great offer is. Now, you can have a good offer that's, like fucking 2x, but that's obviously there's better offers that you can create. So the more the perceived value you can create, the more you can charge. Good question. All right. Next question. So, what separates a top 1% salesperson from everyone else? The biggest thing is majority of sales reps, they're just trying to prove themselves. So, a huge thing is in sales, every single time you get into a deal, everything has to be neutral. The moment you take away the end result and you simply just focus on asking the right questions, that's when you become a sales rep. There's so many sales reps that I know that don't even have any formal sales training, but they simply understand human psychology. The more that someone needs a deal, the less likely they're going to close. So, as a top number one salesperson, obviously you have to have the work ethic, but you have to have the skills, which means being neutral, asking proper questions. And in reality, you really don't need to be that good at objection handling. Well, objection handling is useful. Like it's not going to hurt you being good at objection handling. So many sales trainers and so many of these bullshit Instagram coaches just focus on objection handling nonstop. When in reality, if you have a 10 out of 10 discovery, your calls are going to close a lot easier than having any good objection handling. So you got to obviously put in the work, be coachable, and then you actually have to have the skills. Biggest thing is actually building out proper discovery. So, good question. All right, next question. Let's see. Next question. Give me 1 second. This guy keeps texting me. All right. So, the next question is what is the perfect discovery call structure? So, in reality, both your discovery calls and your closing calls, the actual discovery portion of it is going to be the same. The only difference between a discovery call or a setting call versus a closing call is when you're simply just actually pitching it when you're in a closing call. Now, the proper structure, so you always have to look at everything visually. I'm a visual learner. You have to look at it like an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg, you're simply just introducing yourself and you're starting off with rapport. Now, the biggest thing with rapport is you're not asking them bullshit questions like, oh, hey, how was your day? Or where are you from? Oh, you're from San Diego. I went to the San Diego Zoo when I was 5. It's simply, hey, Mr. Prospect, it looks like you booked in a time for you to learn about X, Y, and Z. Is that correct? Okay, cool. And then from there, you simply just set the frame. You just say how the call is going to go. So it's like, hey, this call is really for me to get an understanding of your setup, what you're currently doing right now, where you're looking to go. If I feel like we can help, so you're going to be neutral, then I'll show you how it works. If not, no worries. Sound fair enough? Notice how I set the frame properly. I'm not saying you're going to join us today. I'm just saying if it doesn't work out, no problem. I'll just point you in the right direction. Everything is neutral. So first off is the report and frame. Then from there, you want to get into actually what prompted the call or what prompted them to fill out the ad. You want to figure out that actual reason. A lot of times they're going to give you bullshit answers. They're going to say, oh, well, I was just curious about this. But, they're just shit testing you. No one is going to fill out a form or specifically book a demo and take 45 minutes out of their time just by searching. There's a different reason for that, especially if you're in B2B. Like, no business owner is going to take 45 minutes to an hour out of their day if they're not actually searching for a solution. So a big problem is a lot of reps are saying, oh, well, he just said that he was looking. It's like, well, motherfucker, you didn't figure out what he was actually going to do. Okay. So then you got to figure out what prompted the call. Next, you got to figure out what they're currently doing right now. So if you're selling marketing or if you're selling software, okay, what tools are you using? Who are you guys currently using for marketing? How is that working? Give me the whole breakdown. Okay. Then number 3 is you want to figure out their actual desired income. You want to literally have them give you what they're looking for specifically. They're going to say, oh, well, I'm looking for better leads. I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. And then you're going to leverage that later in the call. Then you want to get into figuring out an actual problem that they have. So you're going to say, okay, cool. When it comes to actually solving this problem, what's the main thing that you're hoping to improve? And then from there, you start to ask harder questions like, why is figuring that out now important versus waiting? This is going to take out any objections where they say, oh, well, I need to think about it. Okay, so you figure out their desired outcome, then you get a tangible problem. From there, after you get their desired, or after you get the tangible problem, you want to pull an experience. So psychologists and therapists do this great is when they're talking to their therapist, they say, oh, well, can you think about a time when, you may have felt this? It's the same thing. You want to pull experience and say, hey, I understand that you're currently dealing with shitty leads. Can you think about, when you started to figure out that or when that was actually a problem in your business? And the reason you ask these questions is because storytelling and remembering things, you start to relive the pain as a prospect. So once they start to say, yeah, man, I realized we spent $10,000 a month on ads and we didn't really get that many deals. Now they're starting to relive the pain. And then you as a sales rep is like, oh, wow, how did that make you feel? And then boom, they're worse. And then after that, after you get the experience, lastly, you want to ask consequence questions. So you want to ask, okay, what happens if things stay the way right now, you continue to get shitty leads for the next 6 months? They're going to say, oh, well, that's not going to be good. Well, why? And then you're just going to use that against them later in the call. So you always want to ask hard consequence questions. And you always want to get the prospect to say it out loud. Because a lot of times, a lot of reps, they do a shitty job in discovery. And simply what they do is they say, oh, well, they try to tell the prospect what they're thinking. But while sometimes that works, you got to have the prospect say it themselves. So you got to ask these questions. And obviously everyone knows, yeah, if I continue to get shitty leads, it's going to be bad. But you got to get the prospect to actually say it out loud. There's way more power when someone moves internally versus externally. Because what are you more likely to do? Are you more likely to quit drinking if your parents tell you it's bad for you, or if you have a shitty hangover and end up in jail? Which one? Probably the second, because you relived the pain, you actually felt it, and you in your heart of hearts, oh shit, I need to fix myself. I can't be doing this anymore. Boom. Okay. So good question. So just to recap, report what prompted the call, explore the tools, get desired outcome, get the tangible problem, pull the experience, and then ask consequence questions. Okay. And same thing with discovery, appointment setting calls, and closing calls. All you simply want to do, if you're booking the call or you're pitching as a closer, you want to just leverage 2 to 3 pain points that the prospect says into the call or into your pitch per se, just to use it against them. Okay. So that's typically how you do that. Good question. All right, next question. How many follow-ups should you send before giving up a lead? That's a great question. Now, a huge thing with sales teams and sales reps is they don't want to get no for an answer. But they are getting no for an answer by not getting a decision. The whole point of a sales call is simply just to get a yes or no. I would much rather a prospect tell me no or fuck you or get the fuck out of here versus them saying, oh, I need to think about it or follow up with me in 10 days. All I want is a yes or no. Okay. So all you're simply doing on the sales call is getting a yes or no. Now, I'm not saying you should kill every deal by being a dickhead and saying, no, you need to tell me yes or no. But the whole goal of a sales call is you want to get a yes or no and for the prospect to actually make a decision. But telling them, oh, call me back later, it's just a nice way of saying, no, not right now. So how many follow-ups? If they truly need a follow-up, go ahead. And the thing is you don't say, oh, I'm going to reach out to you. You schedule it and you pick an agenda. You say, okay, cool. Well, look, if everything checks out, I know you need to talk to your business partner. If everything checks out, let's go ahead and do this. And then you book them and you say, hey, Tuesday at 2 p.m., you, me, your business partner will meet. I will go over 5 more minutes of your questions. From there, if everything checks out, we'll get you onboarded, we'll collect payment, and then you'll be good to go. Sound fair enough? If they say no, it's like, okay, well, what's holding you back? Well, we'll need some more. Okay, cool. Well, you got to push them to an actual decision. So in reality, you really only need 2 calls. A big thing with follow-ups too is even if they ghost you, you simply just got to call them up or send them over an email or shoot them over a text that makes them force to be you need to reach out to the prospect and get them to make a decision. Majority of reps just say, hey, just checking in. Hey, just following up. In reality, all you simply want to do, you just want to say, hey, John, last time we had a phone call, you said that bad leads were an issue. 90% of them were unqualified. I already gave you the price. I guess, where do you want to go from here? Just let me know. It's that simple. And then if he says no, okay, yeah, I guess what would be holding you back? Or, hey, did you already solve this? But you don't want to say just checking in. You want to actually force them to make a decision. Okay, so good question. All right, next question. At what point should a founder stop selling and hire a sales team? So there's a balancing act with this because I see some business owners, they want to outsource sales right away, or I see some business owners that they don't want to take any reps on and they simply just want to take every single sales call. Now, both of those have their own issues and I'm going to explain what. So if you're a business owner, you need to have proof of concept that what you're doing actually works. You can't onboard sales reps if you can't show them here's how to set appointments, here's how to close deals, here's how to onboard them. And most importantly, you need to show them how everything actually works before they go ahead and do that. It's like you can't train someone if you haven't already done it before. So as a founder, you should have at least closed, I'd say 5 or 6 deals minimum before you actually go ahead and onboard a sales rep. And the reality is if you haven't closed that many deals as a new business, then you don't have that big of a lead flow. Okay. Now, on the other side, there's some business owners that they don't want to ever get out of sales. Well, the truth is if you're the only one taking sales calls, you're never going to be able to actually scale your business. If you're taking 10 sales calls a day while managing fulfillment, managing finances, hiring people, you're just going to burn out very, very quick. I talked to a bunch of business owners, and the max they could take as a full-time business owner was like 5 calls a day. Anything above that, no. And even then, they're still having to do meetings with their marketing team. They're still having to do a bunch of that. So you should have proof of concept first. Once you get proof of concept and you've at least closed 5 to 6 deals and you have actual systems and processes of onboarding, you have structure with your sales systems, and you have proof and call recordings that say, hey, here's what to say when this happens. Here's how to actually close the deals. That's when you can actually build up a sales team. But don't be building a sales team if you don't have any proof or actual background. You can hire a sales manager, but I'd much prefer for people to actually have proof as a business owner of closing the deals. All right, the next question. What role play exercises actually improve your close rate? So the biggest problem that I see with my sales teams, every single rep in the morning does 15 to 20 minutes of sales training or sales role playing, whatever you want to do, and they report it back. Now, every single time they report it back, they just say a couple things that they need to work on. Now, the biggest thing is the biggest needle mover is always going to be working on discovery, drawing out pain. But what I do specifically is I sit down with my team and I watch all of their sales calls and I say, hey, here are the things that you can improve on. Now, before giving them a whole list of 20 different things for them to work on, every single week they should have one task to work on and just hammer it every single week in training. A big problem that I see sales managers and business owners do with their sales reps is they give them a whole list of things they need to work on and say, improve this by next week. While, yes, you can point out the problems that they had on the call, you really only want to have them do one skill at a time because that's going to be able to help them out the most. So take a look at their calls as a sales manager or business owner. Take a look at what's going to move the needle the most. If they're struggling with drawing enough pain, getting the prospect to move urgency, their pitch, and they're having problems with objection handling. If you take a look at all 4 of those problems, drawing out pain and having a proper discovery is going to move the needle way further than those other skills. So have them properly ask discovery questions and ensure that they do a proper discovery and hammer it out for as long as they can until it becomes second nature. Sometimes it takes 7 days. Sometimes it takes 10 days. Sometimes it even takes a month. But just focus on that, the biggest needle moving task, and then move on to the next. Okay, let's take a look at the others. Is it objection handling? Probably not. Is it pitch? Probably not. Okay, they need to draw urgency. Okay, so now they've already mastered actually drawing enough pain. Now they need to get the prospect to move urgency. Now they're going to work on that for a week. Once they hammer that in, okay, cool. Let's look at the next one. Then they need to work on discovery. They're going to focus on 2 to 3 pain points, relating it back instead of doing a feature dump. Then they spend the next week hammering in the next skill. So stop loading a bunch of different skills on, especially new sales reps, because they're going to struggle. Pick one skill, hammer it, and then go to the next one. So great question. All right, next question. What is the number one reason salespeople lose deals that they should have won? The number one reason why people lose deals that they should have won, it's not because they didn't handle the objection. Um, and it's certainly not because the product sucks. It's simply because, number one, a lot of times these guys are not neutral, meaning A prospect can feel them trying to sell them, and a prospect can smell what we call commission breath. This guy is being super needy. He's saying, dude, I for sure know we can help you out, yada, yada. And he sounds very, very forceful. That's number one. No one wants to buy from someone who's needy. It's the same thing with girls. Girls don't want a dude that's extremely needy. The guys that are every guy that's attached and every sales rep that is attached gets the better outcome. So number one, it's not being neutral, it's being needy. Number two, it's just not having proper discovery, not drawing enough pain. Because in reality, you can fuck up a bunch of different things and do a low, like, a shitty job at the pitch. But if you draw the pain from a prospect and make them know that, hey, there's no other decision I need to do on this call besides buy, you can do a subpar rest of the call. But if your discovery is shit, it's not going to work. So the whole reason why salespeople lose deals is number one, being needy. Number two, not drawing enough pain from the prospect. Alrighty, let's see. What are the other questions? Here's a good one. Is sales a skill that you're born with, or can anyone learn it? The biggest bullshit that I see is people say, oh, he's a natural born salesman. Or, dude, I'm such a people person. I'm such a people person. I should go in sales. Or I always see these fucking retarded ass moms who are like, oh, my son is so outgoing. He's a general salesman. It's like, no. Just because you can talk to people doesn't mean you're good in sales. There's a lot of introverts that are way better than at sales than a lot of these guys who are yapping. Because what happens is if you only think that deals are going to close because you're good at talking, you're going to talk the call away. There's so many guys that they're very, very good at talking and they're salesy. All they're simply doing is pushing a product, but they're not asking questions and they're talking majority of the time. The best closers that I see, they're talking like 40, maybe 45% of the call. Prospect is talking the rest of the time. So the more you get the prospect to talk, the more intel you're going to have to leverage in the pitch and leverage later on for the close. So you have to learn sales, and majority of people don't know what the fuck they're saying when they say, oh, well, I'm good at talking. It's like, okay, sure, you're going to be good at talking, but a lot of these people, they just talk, talk, talk. And also, this isn't an infomercial. So many guys are like, I'm a natural born salesman, and they get on a sales call like it's a fucking Billy Mays infomercial. And then it sucks because they're just being super pushy talking about the product. When in reality, all you need to do is figure out what pain points they have, what are they trying to solve, and then show the prospect how you guys actually solve it. So no, I don't think people are born with natural skills for sales. Some people are definitely better, but there's no guy that comes out of the womb and thinks, oh, I'm a goat at it. So good question. All right, next question. How do you sell to someone who says, I need to think about it? Very, very simple. Anytime you get an objection, first off, it's simply, I'd say probably 9 times out of 10, it's just a smoke screen. I need to think about it just means they're unsure and they have something that's lingering in the back of their mind. Okay, so here's what you do. When you have an objection, instead of you giving a knee jerk reaction and saying, oh, well, what do you need to think about it? That's going to raise sales resistance. When you have high sales resistance, you don't open yourself up to the truth and you just give bullshit responses. That's why people say, I need to think about it. I need to talk to my wife. It's because they have high sales resistance. So, prospect says, I need to think about it. Hey, no problem. I understand. This is a big decision. You lower their sales resistance. Then, from there, you simply say, well, man, I obviously don't want to rush you. I guess, how much time do you need to think about it? And then they say, oh, I need 3 days. Okay, cool. So, Tuesday, we can definitely talk on Tuesday. So you're going to act like you're booking in for a follow-up. You're going to say, hey, what time works on Tuesday? He's like, let's talk 2 p.m. Okay, cool. So yeah, we'll talk Tuesday, 2 p.m. Now you act like you're leaving the conversation, so the guy's like, "Oh, phew." So his guard is now down. From there, you go, "Yeah, so real quick, just so I have my ducks in the row for Tuesday's call, I guess what was it that you're looking to go in your mind that, you need to think about?" And then they're going to say the real thing. They're going to say, "Oh, well, it's a little bit out of my price range." It's like, boom, okay. Now you open wallet and figure that out. Or sometimes they say, "Oh, well, I really need to talk about it with my wife, yada, yada." Or, "Oh, well, I just don't know if it can solve X, Y, and Z." So you're uncovering the smoke screen by asking this question. And then from there, you just attack. You say, "Okay, yeah, 100%." And then boom, you just attack it. So always lower the guard when you're handling objections, act like you're leaving, jump back in with the right question, and then always isolate every single objection. The last thing that you want to do is handle the objection and then they give you another one. So always isolate it and then go from there. All right, next question. How do you close a deal without being pushy? So, a huge thing with prospects is they don't want to be pushed. Okay, you never want to be that sales rep. This is why I hate guys like Andy Elliott and I hate sales training videos like Grant Cardone because those guys are the pushiest motherfuckers. You can't in 2026. Everyone has their guard up. Everyone sees Facebook ads. Everyone hops on different sales calls. You can't be pushy. You simply got to be so good at asking proper discovery questions that at the end of the call, they have no other reason but to go with it. Like for me personally, my discovery is so dialed in that my discovery portion of the call is like 20 minutes. My pitch is maybe 3 to 5 minutes. And then from there, I just do a temp check, basically figure out where they are in the call. And I say, "Hey, where do you want to go from here?" But if you do a good enough job of creating, because all sales is figuring out where the prospect is, where they want to be, and building the gap so wide that your solution is so easy to fit in. The farther the gap is, the easier it is to sell. But a lot of these guys, they're super pushy and they don't ask the right questions. So the prospect's pain is here, their solution is here, and then they try to just be pushy and they try to slam in their solution, which doesn't fit. But what I do is I spend 20 minutes asking proper questions, having them say how they actually feel, digging deeper, not taking bullshit questions and having them clarify. A lot of reps or a lot of prospects give you bullshit answers, and I always just act confused. "Oh, could you kind of clarify what you mean by that?" Or I'm not 100% sure I understand what you mean. People want to be understood. The more intel you have, the more data you have, the more leverage you have later in the call. So I do such a great job in discovery. At the end of the call, I say, "Hey man, how do you feel 1 out of 10?" If they say anything other than a 10, I say, "Okay, what's stopping you from being a 10?" They'll give you an objection. I'll say, "Okay, cool. I guess, well, if we could handle this for you, would you be at a 10 out of 10? Okay, cool. So if we could handle this for you, where would you like to go from here?" So it's very simple. I always, at the end of the call, I don't say, we'll get started today. I don't even really do assume the close. I simply just say, "Okay, where do you want to go from here?" If a prospect feels like they're making the decision, they're never going to hop on when you send them the contract. They're never going to hop off, sorry, when you send them the contract. But a lot of the guys who assume the close, they say, "Oh, well, today we're going to get started X, Y, and Z, yada, yada." They send them over the payment link. And then the prospect says, "Oh, we have to pay this today." Or they just hop off the call and say, "Oh, my internet went out." I never get those at the end of the call because I just say, "Hey, where do you want to go from here?" And then because I did such a good job of discovery, they say, "Let's get started." So that's how you close without being pushy, having a proper discovery. Great question. Next question. Which produces better leads in 2025? Inbound or outbound? So if we're talking paid traffic, inbound would be like a book a call funnel. Outbound would be like lead form where you have setters. For me personally, I am doing, because I build SaaS sales teams. No matter what, you have to hop on a demo for SaaS. So I'm always doing book a demo funnels instead of these outbound lead form because it makes no sense. No matter what, the prospect knows they want to see a demo of the SaaS or the software. So they're going to book a demo. But in reality, let's say you're selling coaching, for example. A lot of these guys, they're not going to book. Maybe they just want to see, a lead form or something like that. And then you have a lead magnet, and then you have setters give them up a call. It's hard to say, but for me personally, I do like inbound. A big thing too is if you're a good marketer, just running a book a call is way easier than doing a lead form because when you do a lead form, there's a lot less filtering and they get a lot less information because they're simply just going to a form versus going to a landing page. And then you also have to account into the fact that you need setters. Setters are going to be dialing. Not everyone's going to pick up. Some setters are shit. Some are good. You have to do all that. The simplest thing to do if you have a little bit more of a marketing budget is simply just do Facebook ad or whatever ad, send them to a landing page. Landing page has the calendar and a form all in one, asking them company name, contact name, phone number, email, some filter out questions. And then from there, once they fill out the form, they book a time, but it's not separated. So me personally, I do think book a call works way better than lead form just because there's a lot less moving parts and you can simply just spend the time paying, $35 for a booked call versus having to do the math where maybe you get $5 a lead on a lead form, but you also have to take into consideration which leads converted, which leads picked up, which didn't, which leads got fucked up because your setter sucked. It's the whole debacle. I prefer to run them to a landing page. So good question. Okay. How do you create a scalable outbound prospecting system? So one of my sales teams is strictly outbound. Now, the biggest thing that you have to understand is you have to build a proper foundation and you have to actually show people what success actually looks like. So we show them, okay, here is how the call should go. Here's your calling cadence. And then call recordings. Call recordings are going to be the biggest thing. And then give them all the frameworks as far as how to set the appointments, how to do all this. And then you have to give them minimum KPIs. But a lot of business owners, they say, oh, I need my guys dialing nonstop. I need them to be killers. But they have no onboarding systems. They have no KPIs showing them they need to do 200 dials a day. And they have no call recordings. So if you want to actually create a scalable system, everything has to be repeatable from your onboarding to how people dial to how many dials they must make. And then most importantly, what happens when people actually answer the call. So everything has to be repeatable. Repeatable builds scalability. Good question. Let's see what else. Next question. How do you train yourself not to fear rejection? Okay, the biggest thing is rejection. There's literally no such thing as rejection. At the end of the day, if you didn't already have it, it's not rejection. Rejection means you're losing something. A lot of guys say, oh, well, if I take a sales call, like, maybe they don't buy it. Okay, well, yeah, if you take the sales call and you fuck up or you don't take the sales call, the end result is still the same. You might as well have a shot at closing the deal and making money versus not. It's the same thing with guys who are like too afraid to approach women, like, oh, dude, I don't know if she'll like me. It's like, dude, regardless, you already don't have her. You might as well just go up, grab your nuts, and try to clap. And majority of the time, people respect people that are outgoing and actually have the balls to do it. So yeah, that's a good question, but rejection really is not a thing. Good question. All right, how do you know when your sales process is broken? The easiest way to know when the sales process is broken, aside from your numbers being below what you set them at. So, for example, you set your show rate to be at 70%. You set your close rate to be at 35, 40%. Besides your numbers being off, the biggest indicator, and this is a bigger indicator than having your numbers be off, is your whole team is doing something different. Your setters, you have 3 setters. One of them is doing it the way you taught. One of them is doing his own way. One of them is doing it another way. Same thing with closers. Every closer is doing something different. If you don't have people working in unison, you're never going to be able to take a look and actually test. There's dependent and independent variables. You need to take a look at what is working, what is not. But when everyone is doing something different, it's a lot harder. And that's how you know your sales process is broken. Because number one, it sounds like you don't have a repeatable system that's written down for people to follow. Number two, it sounds like you didn't have proper training that said, okay, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And number three, if people are going ahead and all just doing things willy-nilly, it sounds like you don't have actual leadership skills. Any single time I get people that are not doing proper, not hitting their KPIs, they're not doing sales calls properly, they get a strike. We run a 3-strike system. If they are doing things that is not within the system, they get a strike. We explain to them, here's why you got a strike, and then we show them how to fix it. For example, if someone is starting their call off way differently than what I taught them, that's a strike because they're doing things out of the norm. It is very, very hard to test. But also, if one guy is doing something differently, the other guys are going to start to see that and say, oh, well, he's performing. I guess I can just do it my own way too. And you should never be able to do that. Obviously, this isn't a dictatorship. If something is working, great. But everything must be in uniform for a reason. And yes, you can change things as you go. You can listen to your sales reps, but all the sales reps should predominantly be doing the same thing. That's how you track. All right, next question. What is the biggest mistake people make when handling price objections? The biggest thing, and this goes for any objection, is people just try to show them. You don't want to show, you want the prospect to show you, and you want the evidence to come out of the prospect's mouth. So let's say a prospect says, oh, this sounds good, but it's a lot more expensive than who we currently use, or it's a lot more expensive than the other guys that have hopped off the call with. Say, okay, hey, I understand you want to lower their guard. Hey, agree with them. Hey, I understand completely. Between me, you, and the fence pole here, I like to save money when it matters to. So definitely don't blame you. Then you jump back in. Let me ask you this. I guess if my service and the other service was the same price, who would you go with? And if you're confident enough in your ability and you did a good enough job on the call, they're going to say you. And then from there, you're going to say, okay, cool. Why? Why would you choose me? And then ultimately, you're getting them to sell them, which you're going to use later. And then they're going to say, well, I really like this. I really like this. It's really nice. You clearly are, going to get me better results. It's like, okay, cool. Pause. Now, as a business owner, are you looking to cut corners and save a little bit of money? Or are you looking to get the better results? And then if you did your job correctly, they're going to say better results. Say, okay, cool. Well, why? They're going to say, well, I don't really care about saving $2,000. I want to make an extra $20,000 a month. It's like, okay, cool. So I guess when's the last time you spent, extra money on something in it, you know, and you when's the last time you spent money on something and it was more and you enjoyed it? They're gonna say, yeah, I did X, Y, Z. Okay, cool. Well, where do you feel like you need to go from here? So very, very, very simple. All you're simply doing from there, sorry, this guy keeps texting me. All you're simply doing, like I said, lowering your guard, comparing, hey, if price was out of the equation, what do you feel like you would choose? Figure out why, because you want the prospect evidence to come out of their own mouth. You're going to use that against them later. And then you say, okay, cool. I guess what do you want specifically? More results or for you to cut corners and save a little bit of money? And then obviously, if they're smart and they're not a jackass, they're going to give you the answer that you want. So Good question. All right. What is the fastest way to generate leads with no ad budget? Now, it really depends on what you're selling. The reality is if you have a business, so many people come to me, how can I make money with no capital? It's like, yes, it's possible. Service-based business, 100%, it is possible. But in reality, as a business owner, you need two things: capital and you need skills. And if you're a service based, for example, and you already have proof of concept of skills, you should already have money. Now, let's say you got robbed and you have no money. Content is going to be the easiest thing. You can post videos. For example, a lot of service providers or coaches, they're simply just running content, and that works a lot better because it's more trust. Because everyone sees ads nowadays, but content is something that you can actually learn from. So if you have no ad budget, run content and then do outreach, but not bullshit outreach. No, hey, John, dash, I saw X, Y, and Z, dash, no AI bullshit. Actually take the time to send over meaningful outreach. Like, hey, John, I watched this video. It was fire, but don't like glaze them. Don't be like, yeah, this video was sick. Just be like, yeah, I saw that you mentioned X, Y, and Z. Quick question, and then boom, get into what you're offering. But business owners are more likely to buy from you if you're actually genuine. You're going to get way better results by sending 10 messages to business owners that are actually thought out versus sending out 100 AI messages. Everyone knows those AI messages. And if you send just a generic bullshit messages with a bunch of dashes, it's like, all right, well, this motherfucker, I'm not going to give him any money because he's just being lazy. And people don't want to give money to lazy people, okay? Especially if you're a service provider. So, great question. All right, next question. How do you build a sales process that works without you? So, a bunch of different things. It always comes down to systems and processes, and then leveraging people that know what the fuck they're doing and people that actually follow the systems and processes. So, the biggest thing is you need repeatable systems and processes. You need to show, okay, here is how we call people. Here is how to use a CRM. Here is how to set appointments properly. Here is how to handle discovery. Here is how you pitch. Here is how you close deals. Here are 5 call recordings of me. Here's what I did well on. Here's what I did terribly on. Then, so you need systems and processes that are repeatable and you know for a fact work because you have proof that it works. That's number one. Number two is you need to enforce non-negotiables. Non-negotiables are call review every single night. Review 2 to 3 calls and give back a summary of what worked, what didn't work. The admin tasks shouldn't take more than 5 to 15 minutes, but call reviews should take, 20 to 30 extra minutes are going to go way further than just continuing having the same calls and fucking up in the same place in the calls and just not learning from anything. So 20 to 30 minutes or whatever, review sales calls before the day. You want to do AI role play or role play with human beings. Spend 15 minutes. Take a look at what they need to work on. Simply hammer that skill for a week and then move on to the next. Once you scale that as a business owner, you're simply going to place a sales manager, give them the whole blueprint, and then from there, you have a business or you have a sales team per se that's working without you because you have the systems and processes. Everyone knows how to set appointments. Everyone knows how to close deals. Everyone knows what works, what doesn't work. Everyone knows how the CRM works. And everyone knows what they need to do to ensure that they don't fall off as a sales rep, technically wise. Okay? So that's how you build it. Build systems and processes, build non-negotiables, and then hire a sales manager that simply enforces all those things. Okay? So that's the last question. If you guys have any more questions, I'll be doing live stream every single day. And yeah, we'll see you guys tomorrow.